What up, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the show. On this episode, we spoke with an incredible entrepreneur who is able to do a six-figure campaign in the physical product category on Kickstarter. And now they've actually moved that on to Indiegogo in demand. So we're going to actually learn a lot when it comes to this campaign about product design, about inspiration, and as well, I think a little bit about what actually works in terms of getting funding, right? So one of the kind of secrets to Kickstarter is understanding the X factor that goes into whether or not your campaign will be rapidly funded. And we talked a little bit about that on today's show. So you've been kind of wondering, first of all, how do you actually kind of gamify this whole Kickstarter launch? How do you hack this? How do you make sure that you can reverse engineer it so you are ensured of having a successful launch? I think you're going to learn a lot about that on today's show. In addition, for those of you that want to discover and learn some of the tricks of the trade going into a campaign, the things you should know about product design and what makes things stand out, I also think this is going to be well worth your time in today's incredible podcast episode. So one of the things that I'm kind of dedicated to is to make sure that you have access. It is so important to me that you have access. And I think the reason why this is important is that I feel like in my own life, lack of access has always held me back when it comes to success in different areas. And one of the things that I wanted to radically shift and change in this industry when I got involved in 2012 and when I started my podcast in 2015, started my YouTube channel in 2016, putting out content. Now we're over 30,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, right? Which is insane, which is crazy thinking about that number of people, right? That are actually following us, that are a member of the Crowdfunding Demystified community and have learned from these teachings. Like, it's so insane. But one of the things that's just been so important to me is giving you access, because I think that when you're able to listen to real world people who actually are seeing success, and you can just study those people, you can just study what they went into that success, right? And really begin to think bigger than you've ever thought or imagined possible. When you get the right information, the right training, when you're willing to learn, magic can happen, right? You got to be willing to necessarily change a little bit of the way that you think, but if you're willing to be flexible and really just kind of soaking up that information like a sponge, I'm telling you, I've had so many people who have come on this show, have been a listener, and then they're like, dude, I actually was a listener of your podcast, and now I'm on your podcast, and this is crazy, this is wild, and now we did a 6-figure, 7-figure campaign. Like, this is so cool. So this is something that's real. This is something that's real life that's happening. People around the world that are raising money every single day when it comes to Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and crowdfunding. And I'm trying to document that for you. I'm trying to give you access so that you're that kind of like that fly on the wall who's listening to the conversation, who's soaking up all that information so you can apply this to your campaign and you can have a mega launch. You can hit it big. I really encourage a lot of my students to think big, because so often it's ourselves, quite frankly, that is limiting our success. You're going to discover a lot of that on today's podcast episode. Just got one thing to mention here before we get into this. So first of all, I got a great book out there called the Kickstarter Launch Formula, where I've really documented and codified a lot of these teachings that I've had over the years, as well as upgrading them, all the different new things when it comes to what works to get funding for a campaign, the tricks, the techniques, all that kind of stuff that I kind of almost like, I put into more of a formulaic process, because again, after interviewing so many people, 200, 300 plus, and having so many coaching students and having so many people that I've worked with, et cetera, I really began to see a formula that kind of like almost unveiled itself. And I call it demystifying, right? Almost like demystified. And I put that all into the Kickstarter launch formula. So if you want to just get access to it and sort of have that rapid fire information delivered straight to you, I have an audiobook for this, and Audible is doing a promotion where they will give you a free copy of this audiobook. You just got to sign up for a free trial of Audible and you get to keep the book. So go and check this out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. And for those of you out there that maybe aren't interested or ready yet to invest in a book like that, which again, I think is one of the best investments you can make, and you're just kind of looking to get some more free information, I'll do have also a free course as well that will walk you through doing a Kickstarter campaign the right way, how to be effective, how to make sure you drive traffic right, and what do you really need to do to make people show up on day one. You can go to the link I'm about to mention at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. That link will take you to the free course. Just go to crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter, enter your name and email, and you will start getting some training information and videos from me so you can get started ASAP on this campaign. Thank you so much. Let's get into today's podcast episode and let's learn how these individuals were able to a 6-figure campaign for their product. And it's coming up right after this. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfill Right, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillright.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. fulfillright.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have a six-figure Kickstarter campaigner on the show who's recently just moved into In Demand. This is for Goldie, a warm, safe home for your sourdough starter. Really interesting product, beautiful design, and we are lucky enough to have one of the co-founders here today on the show. Erik, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Salvador, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Definitely, man. So for those of you that are not familiar, can you just describe a little bit about Goldie and also your role in the project?
Sure. So Goldie is a warm, safe home for your sourdough starter. Anyone who bakes sourdough bread has a slurry of flour and water that contains the bacteria and yeast that we use to puff up and flavor our bread. And so Goldie's sole purpose in the world is to kind of provide a home on your counter for that starter, to keep it at an ideal temperature where it's most active and healthy, and and to create a place where it look nice, help things keep things tidy, that sort of thing. Goldie was an idea that I had, early in the pandemic, April 2020. I had shifted from being a marketing consultant to a stay-at-home dad. We had left New York to stay with some family, and I was kind of fishing around trying to figure out what to do with myself. And I was having conversations with friends about the world, and reached out to my friend Jennifer Yoko Olson, who's an industrial designer. We started talking about stuff, and I shared an idea I had for a simple warmer for sourdough starters, and she got real fascinated with it. Sourdough bread was trending at that time, and I think she, as a designer, kind of got curious about this idea of a product that solves a problem that currently didn't have a solution, but had lots of DIY solutions that you can kind of see if you go on any of the sourdough forums or any of that kind of stuff. You can see all these kind of contraptions and different ideas people have for kind of solving this problem. So she came at it very analytically from this kind of approach of here's a design problem that's interesting to solve, and learned to bake bread through the process. And together we took my kind of rough idea and created the product and the brand and all that kind of stuff from there.
Very cool, very cool. And when you kind of had this idea, had you ever brought a product to market before? Have you designed a product before at all?
Nothing like this. I have my backgrounds in the arts and doing lots of kind of performance and event type stuff. So I've created lots of event type experience, event products, if you will. And then my kind of professional life has been in brand marketing for a long time. So I headed up the brand for Moleskine in the Americas for many years, and I've worked for SaaS companies and different types of things. So, and when I was at Moleskine, we certainly created variations on an existing successful brand and brought those to market, and look for ways to scale a brand that people love. But I never had personally kind of gone through the nuts and bolts of kind of making something like this. And even though Jenny, honestly, she's an industrial designer and she's made physical products of various sorts in the past, she's done it within the context of companies, or she's done things in different kind of formats. She's made some furniture products. She's made some kind of works on electronic type stuff, but she's never kind of done things with like glass and simple home good type things. So it was a new experience for both of us.
For you, had you thought of maybe making a business out of this, or was it really about getting a product out there that is solving a problem that a lot of people experience, or were you thinking more in the business kind of realm?
Well, I always think about the business piece of it, but at this point in my life, I've started enough things that have either gone nowhere or have kind of broken even to know that, you prepare for success the best you can, but really you have to take it step by step. So my challenge was to kind of sell the idea to the one person. And that was Jenny, ultimately, like the first person to kind of give me like, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. Right. And then the next person, we had to sell it to was probably my wife, convince her I should spend time on this. But then, it slowly build it. And like along the way, you're like, you have a thesis, you run experiments. I was kind of putting together these Frankenstein versions of the product early on and running tests on temperature and different things just to see if my notion of like how you warm the starter and, what would be the best approach, was valid. And then, we had conversations with bakers and we got feedback at different stages all along the way. And so I've always been viewing this as kind of a step-by-step, trying to kind of approach it as something that is going to be profitable, and, has margin and can potentially be sold in different ways and all that kind of stuff. So the business is legitimate as we've kind of validated the product. But I see those things as going hand in hand. So it's not an art project, but it's also not like, we're maximizing profit and trying to create the most, kind of highest margin thing. We definitely wanted to make it good, to do it right, and to create something that people would love. And, really that honors the kind of spirit of sourdough baking, because the sourdough community is so warm and generous and helpful. And, we couldn't have launched this probably as easily in a different community, because without the help and the generosity, all the people that gave us feedback and tested things out as we went along.
So a lot of people, look at this, or they hear about your experience when it comes to being a marketing consultant, or, your co-founder's industrial design. They're like, okay, so you can get this together, very quickly. How long did it take really for you to go from idea to getting this out there into the world? I know you like to take your time, right? You really like to make sure that you're putting that into so you can succeed. How long did it actually take you to get this together?
I got some feedback from Cleve, who is the guy who founded Man Kitchen and had a big campaign called the Pepper Cannon on Kickstarter a while back. And he told me it took him 2 years. And I was like, no way. And it ended up taking 2 years. So he was totally right. And when I started, I thought we could get something, I thought we could get like a concept, a rough prototype, kind of a little bit better than vaporware, but, something with a basic kind of sales deck. And, we'd either take it to some retailers or we'd pop it up on Kickstarter, and we could do that in a few months. And I suppose if I had been back in like a marketing context of like a company where I had, more resources, if it wasn't COVID, if I wasn't, a full, a stay-at-home dad, maybe that would have been possible. But between that and context of my life at that time, and we're basically working on this on weekends and evenings and having to figure it all out as we go. And we ended up doing a lot ourselves, like everything from, designing our logos and, coming up with, names and copies and putting stuff up on social media, as well as designing the product and so on. So we did it the long, hard way for sure. And we've done it very scrappy with very low investments, so to keep our risk low as we've been kind of testing and validating the idea. So yes, it could have probably happened faster. And we had thought we were going to launch it maybe a year ago, but we had kind of a false start because we actually announced the brand and we did like a campaign to start building a list. And, it was like a storytelling campaign just to kind of introduce the idea of Sourhouse to the world. But we ended up not being satisfied with where the prototype was at that point, making, a glass cloche, this glass lid that's on our device is not a simple process to get that right. And, figuring out different little details, like it just wasn't there. So we just stopped and we, kind of kept working on the product till we felt like it was right.
Yeah, I mean, that also, I assume, will kind of go into your willingness to promote it. So if you don't believe in the products, right, it's going to be hard for you to be willing to really invest money into getting it out there, or to your own time, right, and speak in a convincing way. So that's awesome. I think that speaks a lot to your values as well.
Yeah, I think it's always the easiest thing to sell something that you believe in, for sure.
So you've been in this for a long time. You've been going through multiple iterations, right? You've been bringing other people as well into the project. What was that like the night before you actually went live with this campaign on Kickstarter? What was going through your mind at the point in time?
Well, it was very nerve-wracking. I decided to launch it based on, I had consulted on somebody else's campaign a while back. And so I used some of the timing that he did for that as a model. And so I had decided to launch it at like 6 a.m. Eastern time or something. And I made a lot of my timings actually like middle of the night timings. And I realized one thing was like, why did I make it so hard on myself? Why was I waking up so early to like launch these things? So that was one little learning, is just like, make it more convenient for yourself to, because you do have to press a button to turn things on and, different stages. Yeah. But I don't know, I was just like we were having problems with Facebook, and we had not been able to spend as much money on Facebook ads to build our initial list for the last week, right up to then. So we weren't quite where I wanted us to be or I expected us to be with our list, but or like pre-launch list, but we had something there and we had good vibes, and we had like definitely everybody who tested it and who's seen it really liked it. And we had done everything, like we were proud of our video and our page, and, and we had felt like we put the time in. And it was really kind of like the point of no return, in the sense that like we needed to turn it on. Like there's only certain windows you can kind of really launch a campaign. You obviously want to avoid summer because people pay less attention to Kickstarter then. But also for our product, like, we had hoped to actually launch in the fall beforehand. So it had been like sourdough season, but we missed that. And then we were in the spring, and we were like, if we don't get it up now, we're not going to have
the baby out. Yeah.
It's not going to deliver before Christmas, and we're not going to have a chance to sell it potentially through wholesale in the holiday gift guide kind of season. So if we don't do it now, we're going to miss all kinds of opportunities. So it was like time to go. And,
now or never.
And we did it. Yeah. And we did it the best we could.
What do you think was in the minds of your people who were waiting eagerly to discover this on Kickstarter? Like, what was going through their minds, do you think? Like, were they aware of the pricing at that point in time? Were they aware of everything when it comes to the page? What had they seen? Like, what do you feel like their experience was like?
Well, we had kept things pretty quiet, except for, maybe a dozen people who were like giving us feedback and so on along the way. We, in part because we just didn't probably have the capacity to like announce it and keep everybody's attention for a long period of time before the campaign. So we ended up doing about a 30-day pre-launch campaign where we had a landing page that was essentially just a picture of Goldie and some very simple text saying like, this is a safe home for your starter. Most starters are happy at this kind of Goldilocks temperature range of 75 to 82 degrees. And this device helps you keep your starter there. And then we invited them to a list, and we also had a Facebook group. And to that list, we did a drip campaign and kind of slowly kind of introduced both the story, the pricing, that kind of stuff. So, our list was aware of some of the details beforehand, and, the discounted pricing that we had early on. But in general, like a lot of it got revealed quite last minute, like up to the last couple of weeks or so.
Exciting. And did they know that they were joining this like support a Kickstarter, or was this about the product itself, or what do you feel like, they were really looking forward to there?
I don't feel like the general world, like people are aware of Kickstarter now, I think. But within the sourdough baking world, there's a lot of it's a huge age range. Like you'll have bakers anywhere from teenagers up to like, people that are in their 70s, right? And definitely the awareness of Kickstarter is not consistent across that range. And so I feel like from a communication point of view in general, you can only introduce so many ideas at a time. So our first goal was to introduce the notion of Goldie by Sourhouse, this basic idea that it's a warm, safe home for your starter. There's a reason for that. Come join us and learn more and get a discount. And then as they entered into that story, we just kind of like casually introduced that it will be, available for pre-order and stuff on Kickstarter, and kind of just use that as a landing page. Did not necessarily kind of foreground like this is Kickstarter, so it is more credible, but assume that like for some people that may be the case, but for a lot of people, and which I think proved to be the truth, we're going to come to Kickstarter for the first time and have to be educated to what Kickstarter is and how it works and sign up for an account first time. So we had to kind of hold them by the hand and take them through it and make sure that it didn't scare them off. So we were trying to build credibility in all those kind of traditional kind of marketing ways through testimonials and communication.
So, looking through your page, it looks so beautiful, man. Like, it looks incredible. The glass design, the way it kind of sits on the marble countertop there, right? It looks really freaking cool. When it comes to the product, what do you say you're most proud of, right? Is it the way that it performs? Is it the materials it's made of? What are you most proud of when it comes to that?
Well, just that we did it, like it was this idea, and we, I worked on a lot of projects where, you get excited about it, but you stop. And something about this, Jenny and I just kept working on it. And a lot of the, visual touches and the beauty, it really is thanks to Jenny and, her taste and the collaboration that, we had to kind of pull these things out from the basic kind of functional idea that I had. And, the form factor is like, a device on a base with a cover. I had that basic idea, but like touches like how we do place the handle and like definitely how it's, all comes together was very much a contribution thanks to Jenny. But also like, as a marketer, it's like you spend your life looking for new markets and ideas that are going to capture people's ideas, imaginations. And I worked on that at Moleskine when I was there, and I saw what it looks like to have a brand that people passionately love, but you don't get to kind of create that often. And I really feel like we found and have validated to some degree so far, and there's still more to prove, but that there is a kind of an open space for this sort of device, and that the sourdough home baking market is still very young, and there's room for more ideas in the space. So I think personally, it's like just the idea that we not only created it, but kind of validated a conceptual niche of, positioning niche.
There's also like a personality to it almost in a way.
Yeah. And, we got there through a process, and, it emerged, and we were it just kind of came together in a lot of ways. Like, we named it Goldie because, it's like the Goldilocks zone is our temperature concept where it's like, not too hot, not too cool. And we use that visually within some of the kind of communication of the device through the lights and stuff that are on it. But but that wasn't like something that we were like started with, and it could have been probably pretty lame if we had started with like, let's make a Goldilocks zone kind of thing. Like we just arrived there through digging down into the details of the functionality and understanding how we and other bakers work. And so we got there in a very honest way. And I think it feels right because of that.
When you're talking about this idea of captivating the public's imagination, right? And the way that Moleskine as well, like the customers are so delighted, right? And the way that they love that brand and they're like raving when it comes to that. And you, to a degree, also having this around the project. Do you feel like there are any secrets to that process? Is it really understanding the customer? Is it the design aspect? What do you feel like kind of creates that raving fan feeling when it comes to a product like that that's branded so well?
Well, I've thought about that a lot over the years and try to consult with people to help them with that. And there's a lot to it, I think. Certainly you have to have a good product. Like you have to take the time and care and make a good product, and you have to understand who's it for and, respect them. And I think that you probably are not you have to find that line between creating something that's good and beautiful and kind of an art project and something that actually is, something that can be sold and people want to buy. But I also think that you have to find your moment. It's like I would have loved to have launched this 2 years ago in the midst of the sourdough boom, right? That was happening during COVID. That would have been great. We probably would have had a much bigger campaign and have a much bigger story because it would have done it for us. But there's something about, finding the right fit and in the right cultural moment as well as that kind of like functional fit in terms of providing a user experience that people need and want and want to buy. It takes a lot of work, but it's like if you can find that, then I think people start to embrace the thing that you're offering.
The other thing I've kind of noticed is that when it comes to Moleskine, it comes to your brand, right? Really finding the people as well who love that hobby, right? And just like they're proud of almost like the tools that they're using as well. Like when you're writing a Moleskine journal, it feels so cool. It feels like you're like Hemingway or something, right? It makes you enjoy the activity so much more. I think with Goldie, that's also true. If you like baking at home, whether you're an expert or a beginner, it gives you that feeling of like, this is freaking cool, right?
Yeah. And, you can create different kinds of brands, but I definitely lean that direction and started with this because, if you're on Instagram, you'll notice that, anybody bakes, they love to showcase their bread on Instagram. And so bread has become a kind of a symbol of identity in the last few years, even before COVID. And so to me, when I'm talking about like this position, this cultural position, I just realized that there was space to create more objects that help kind of showcase one's passion for sourdough baking. And even though people have done it for 1,000 years, there's, the technology context we're in and stuff now has kind of amplified that. So creating objects that provide those platforms, that those kind of symbols of identity is always very powerful within those kind of moments. And Moleskine did that in an important way when it started. And, there's a whole story to that I could kind of go into, but we felt like that was, that was the opportunity, I think, with something like Goldie right now.
So when you launch this campaign and you're trying to get tons of people that are taking action, you're going up in the charts. What did that feel like for you? Was for you like a validation of everything you've been doing? Was it now like, oh gosh, now I have all these customers, right? And it has to fulfill the products. What did you feel like that experience was like for you to really realize that?
We had felt internally that, it's hard to set your goals on this stuff, but we felt internally like getting like 500 people would validate the product. And so 1,000 is great. But we would have been happy to sell 5,000, right? It's like, I don't think there's a limit. I think that I feel like we're at a size right now that's still somewhat manageable. Like I can still handle the level of like emails and customer service we get. So that's actually quite nice. Along the way, I'm able to have that direct connection with our kind of fans and customers and learn from that and get their feedback as we go. But definitely it was like early on, like we knew, just tactically, you needed to set a goal that you could hit in the first day or first 3 days to create momentum and keep going. And like I said, we were having different challenges with some of our kind of marketing plans weren't working like we assumed. So we were kind of doing a lot of like word of mouth, kind of just manual kind of marketing and relying on our list to kind of get going. So we were super excited that we hit our minimum within our first 3 days and that we could shift from
Huge.
that story of being like, an idea to something that was actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, we just tried to continue to build on that. But it was like, that was a huge milestone that was exciting, but also nerve wracking. And like, the whole thing was like both.
So as you're going through this and you hit those minimums, which is exciting, like you said, do you feel like there are any things looking back in hindsight when it comes to the marketing channels that you would have done differently? Would you have distributed maybe your communications in different channels? Is there any way to plan for kind of what happened there? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like tons of learnings. I think that the main thing is like diversify. Don't just depend on one channel. Like I'm not necessarily a huge fan of using Facebook to build a brand, but we needed to work within that ecosystem because there's so much sourdough baking happening on Instagram and Facebook. But then they ended up just for technical reasons, putting like they needed to do a business verification on our account, which ended up
So annoying.
And it happened a week before we were supposed to launch, which limited our ability to scale our spending for 3 weeks because their customer service is so like awful that you can't get to anybody. And like I had my ad guy working on it, me working on it. Like I was reaching out to friends who work at Facebook. Like I was doing everything I could to solve this. Right. And it was, so we were expecting to spend a lot more money than we did through Facebook. But luckily we, had built up a list, we had our own kind of friends and family networks. We tried doing some PR. We tried doing some paid kind of newsletter type stuff. And, we just kind of went into it with a multi-channel perspective. And we certainly could have done more. But a lot of people tell me TikTok is the place to launch a Kickstarter campaign now. It wasn't quite the right audience fit for us, but like I could see the value in that. I think that kind of flexibility, because things are going to go wrong. Like we, at the end of the day, we probably performed at 50% of our capacity. And if we did this again, we could probably make it a lot bigger. But nonetheless, 50% was good enough. And that, I think you do have to have that mindset where you like, you have to give yourself a lot of margin for mistakes and failures.
So you kind of took this experience, and like you said, the fact that you can continue to, produce this, and you guys have a really good development timeline. It looks like you brought this over to Indiegogo, right? Do you want to talk a tiny bit about that? And I don't know if you're running a deal there or anything like that.
At the moment, we are trying a variety of different things. So we'll be there for at least another month and then eventually kind of launching Shopify for ourselves. But you can get our 3 basic bundles and add on some jars and some different things that we have to go with it. And then we're going to periodically be announcing different kind of little deals, I think, just to honestly to test out pricing and to test out different audiences as we go. So, but this is like definitely the best price that you can get right now. I think definitely kind of pay attention there over the next month to see what we kind of come up with to kind of test out the space. I'm just really looking at Indiegogo at this point is like a, kind of experimental space to kind of better understand our audience, to better kind of understand our marketing.
Awesome, man. So one other question, because pre-interview we were talking a little bit about this, is this idea of like planning out your fulfillment timeline, and this could also be due to costs, right? Like VAT, shipping costs, all that kind of stuff. I know you had a tip you want to share on that front. I just kind of want to set you up for that one.
Sure. So I would say that, everybody tells you to think about shipping because it's a big hassle, and it's totally true. And I thought I had it solved, and then a week or so before I realized I did not have it solved, and I had to go figure it out all over again. But in addition to just the nuts and bolts of like, how are you going to fulfill and like, what's the cost of fulfillment? I think that really that thought process should start when you're doing your product development, because one of the cost drivers of shipping is the size of packaging. So the size of your product and then the size of the package that you develop for it is going to affect your ability to kind of ship at a certain price point. The other thing is price. Certain countries have kind of ceilings on prices. Like I think it's like $150 dollars or euro or something, like in the UK, for instance, or that if you're below it, you get charged in a certain way. If you're above it, you're charged in a different way. So like pricing is super hard in general, but like thinking about where you want to position yourself pricing and how it's going to affect your responsibility to pay VATs and different kind of like taxes along the way, something else to think about. So, and those things take weeks to solve often. So it's like, I would say, don't just think of it as like don't think of it as like a post-campaign fulfillment issue. Think of it as a product issue.
Yeah, very well said. Well, this has been a lot of really good information, and you guys have backers around the world, right, that are supporting this. So I'm so excited to see your progress here. My final question for you is, if you had one tip or one final word of encouragement or something you want to speak directly to the audience and share, it could be a bit of inspiration, it could be something that you wish you knew before you embarked in this process, or it could be a final tip related to the Kickstarter platform, anything along that. And we can end on that note.
Yeah, well, it's just like, it's really exciting and it's a lot of work, but it's totally worth doing. But just keep in mind that you're going to build the project one person, one relationship at a time, and like one test at a time. And this thing is going to accumulate. And ultimately, you are going to get to the point when you launch this thing where a whole crowd of people were there supporting you along the way. And those are the people that are going to be your biggest kind of cheerleaders as you try to launch and move from product development to marketing. So those people are super valuable, and it's worth going through those product development steps with other people along the way, because you don't want to have to start from zero when you're marketing.
Love it. And do you have a URL that you want people to check out?
You certainly can come learn more about Sourhouse. It's sourhouse.co. And we will, obviously there's going to be links to Goldie and all kinds of stuff there. And then you can kind of follow us on Instagram at life@Sourhouse at Instagram.
Great. Erik, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Great advice, great tips. Also, freaking inspirational, man, the way you've been able to pull this together, go from idea to full-fledged product, and can't wait to see your further success.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Oh man, I've been having so many interesting calls recently with coaching students. A lot of you guys are super ambitious, and I love it. I mean, just the level of prototypes and the design experience and the things that people are putting together nowadays is literally just blowing my mind. And we even have people who aren't necessarily like designers, but they're literally they put together a prototype. They're just passionate. Maybe they're working in construction. Maybe they're working in real estate, right? Maybe they're doing something else with their full-time job. They carved out enough time in their schedule to create a prototype or an idea. And they bring this to me, and I'm blown away with just the innovativeness of our audience, just the different problems that we're all solving, the ways that we're attacking that. Also obviously doing calls when it comes to like board game categories and creative categories. And you guys are like part of a renaissance here, in my opinion. I think that my audience is so incredibly intelligent and special. And I think that you guys, again, like I said, are almost like, your own little Leonardo da Vinci's in the way that you come up with ideas and solve problems and take action. That's another hallmark, I think, of the Crowdfunding Demystified and the Crowd Crux audience, is that we take action, my friends. And we're just like, we're not willing to settle for less. I think that action taking is so important. Otherwise, you just keep an idea in your head. However, I do think there are legitimate things that hold us back every once in a while, whether that's not knowing what's around the next bend, or not knowing what to do, not knowing how to actually, do or get past a major barrier, or even if your product is a good fit for Kickstarter or not, right? So one of the things that I love to do is to do one-on-one coaching calls with students. This is something where I make myself publicly available, which is always very interesting, right? To put yourself out there publicly. And it's something I've been trying to do for a long time, because for me, it's one of the most important ways to give people access access. So you can get access, obviously, with the podcast. You can watch my YouTube videos. You can read my books. You can take my paid and premium courses, which actually I don't put out there too much. And I open them up once in a while. My membership communities, etc. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I got going behind the scenes that most people aren't even aware. But when it comes to this, one of the things I do try to make more, public is the fact that I do one-on-one coaching calls. And the reason why I do these, again, is not only to give you a foundation when it comes to this, but also there's just so many different unique categories, right? There's so many different categories when it comes to the types of products that you're trying to launch. Is it going to work for you? Certain categories, you got to do certain stuff in order to be successful. So if you kind of want to get more dialed in for your specific category, you want to talk shop a little bit, you want to find out what you got to do in order to be successful. I've had a lot of people as well who want to work with me in some way, and that leads to obviously, screening them, seeing if this is something that would be interesting in that way, introducing them to other service providers, giving them access to resources and tools, things that they didn't even know about, right, when it comes to their campaign, or in some cases, giving them a strategy that they can use in order to be phenomenally more successful when it comes to their launch. So there's so much stuff to understand with crowdfunding that I do try to make it easy, digestible. I try to demystify it for you. If you want to go that next level and you really want to invest a little bit more into making sure that this is going to be a good launch for you, you can book a one-on-one coaching call with me as long as I am still doing them at the time this podcast is up. You can go to this link I'm about to mention at crowdcrux.com/coaching. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/coaching will take you there, and you can schedule a one-on-one coaching call with me and get that squared away ASAP. Thank you for listening. If you're listening on Spotify, please give me a positive rating and review. If you're listening on iTunes, please give me a positive rating and review. And also, if you're tuning in on YouTube, give me that thumbs up. Let us know. Show your love. Leave a comment. Come subscribe for more content like this. And I will see you next time.